listeners, welcome to the quarterly podcast of TRUSTS, Trusted Secure Data Sharing Space, an innovation action funded by the EU Commission's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme. Today's interview partner is Natalia Simon. She owns a master's degree in economic sciences from the University of Dortmund and is currently Project and Innovations Manager for the International Data Spaces Association, the IDSA, a key player of the European data community. Within TRUSTS, Natalia contributes to the business development of the platform and platform federator planned to result from the project. Above other things, she supports survey creation and analysis for requirement elicitation. Welcome, Natalia.
Yeah, thank you, Nina, for the kind invitation.
Thank you as well. Before we start with our chat, Natalia, I would like to give the listeners who are with us for the first time a short outline of the project. TRUSTS aims at creating a secure and trustworthy European data market as well as platform federator for personal and industrial use. This should be achieved by interconnecting different user groups and providing generic functionalities for innovative applications and services. Dear Natalia, in your profession at IDSA, you work with various subgroups of the European data community. Could you kindly give us a short outline of which those groups are?
Yes, sure. So the IDSA in its nature is a non-profit organization, and therefore we are already very much tied up with different kinds of stakeholders because, our goal is basically to collect and to bundle different requirements from industry and feed them back to research. So therefore, we are in constant exchange with a very heterogeneous range of stakeholders all the time. So these can be industry representatives, politicians, or also researchers. And one type of these groups are the 4 IDS communities, consisting of relevant stakeholders from exactly these fields I mentioned, industry, research, and government. And they are developing blueprints for data sovereignty in the areas of mobility, industry, logistics, and healthcare. And with this, they make sure that the industry-specific requirements are considered directly. And in addition to this, we are in dialogue with people from the political level, for example, the European Commission. And with this, we strengthen the awareness for secure and sovereign data exchange. And in this way, we want to create the most supportive conditions for the creation of data spaces.
Okay, I see. But which aspects resulting from your work within the IDSA do you see relevant for the development of the TRUSTS project?
So I see here 3 different things the IDSA is supporting TRUSTS with. The first thing would be that we are offering the IDS reference architecture model as a prerequisite for the TRUSTS platform, so that the platform becomes trustworthy and is based on data sovereignty standards, which is currently one of the hot topics in Europe when it comes to digitalization. And the second point where the IDSA is supporting the TRUSTS project is in creating awareness, what I already mentioned before, because data sovereignty and the necessity for trustworthy data sharing is currently in focus and should be put more into focus. And via different communication channels, we are, so to say, spreading the word here. We are having, for instance, open talks with stakeholders from very active countries in this field, like, for instance, Finland, the Netherlands are very active, Spain and Italy. And also we are having those talks with partners in domains that are very active in this field, especially, for example, currently the mobility sector. And we are also having speeches and presentations at remarkable events, or we are creating easy, understandable communication materials, like, for example, videos on the topics, what is data sovereignty? And the third thing the IDSA is supporting TRUSTS with is that the IDS Association is strongly supporting and facilitating the development of the IDS approach and its technologies. So be it with the working groups or with the IDS adoption team. And the results of this work may be reflected directly at the TRUSTS architecture. For example, we are bringing in up-to-date data space components like the most relevant one, the IDS connected technology.
I see. Okay, thank you for those explanations, Natalia. In general, the TRUSTS European data market will be based on the reference architecture designed by the International Data Spaces Association, as you just have mentioned. Can you give us a short outline how this reference architecture looks like and why it is guiding for TRUSTS?
Sure. So, yeah, the IDS architecture is considered as the de facto standard for creating and operating data ecosystems. The approach of the architecture is to tackle current issues in data sharing by considering three different things. So the first one is that it enables interoperability between different systems through semantic data descriptions. The second thing is that it is meant to create trust between participants through certified security functions and also through the IDS certification scheme. And the last point is that the architecture is meant to establish governance rules for data usage and data flows. And so all in all, the IDS architecture ensures data sovereignty for those who make their data available in data ecosystems. And yeah, how does the architecture look like? So the architecture describes several components a data space is consisting of. And some of them are mandatory, for example, the IDS connector that we have mentioned. And then we have three components for an identity provider, which would be the dynamic attribute provisioning service, the certificate authority, and also the participant information system. Yeah, and then there are some optional components that a data space could consist of, and this would be, for example, a clearinghouse, a broker, an app store, or a vocabulary provider. And these components are all described in the IDS reference architecture.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. A word I have heard a few times already is data sovereignty. I think that data sovereignty is one of the most important aspects for data sharing, whether it's of personal or industrial use. Could you kindly outline us shortly how IDSA tackles the issue of data sovereignty within its data spaces?
Yeah, so data sovereignty in general means that a person or an organization is always aware what is happening with their own data, who is using it, who does what with the data, and also that the person is able to manage what is happening. He's not only aware of what is happening, but also has the power or the ability to make constraints to the data, how to use it. And I could use a short example from the industry to explain what this data sovereignty could mean. Imagine you are a small machine manufacturer and you would like to get some components produced via 3D printing. Since there are many possibilities and companies that are offering the service. But the design of the component should not be disclosed because, for example, of a strong competition in your industry. And this is especially true for example, CAD files. Which you would need to pass over to the 3D printing organization. And the IDS technology offers here the technical solution that you can share your CAD file, but without revealing, for example, every detail to everyone or to prevent others to copy your CAD file. The manufacturer is, for example, able to put some usage control or usage constraints on top of the files. They can say, for example, your file can only be used once or can only be used 3 times a week or only on Fridays at 3 o'clock in the morning or something like this. So you can define what is happening with your data and the others have to stick to it because it's technically enforced. And this creates basically a win-win situation because on the one hand, the manufacturer does not lose control over the data. He is aware all the time what is happening. He controls what is happening and he does not need to buy an own 3D printer. And on the other hand, the 3D printing company still gets orders in order to print 3D components. yeah, that's basically the benefit of IDS in this case.
Okay. Thank you also for the example. That definitely makes it a little bit more graspable. An additional aspect you are working on in Trust is the standardization, updates, and recommendations. How are you approaching that?
Yeah, so this task aims especially at the topic of interoperability and standards that are supporting this goal of interoperability. Therefore, we are currently in the process of elaborating, assessing, and identifying how relevant concepts or standards can and should be developed or extended in order to ensure a state-of-the-art trust ecosystem. And yeah, to be a little bit more concrete, we are having a closer look at what different standards or concepts have been used or considered within trusts already. We collect some qualitative feedback about the relevance and eventually undertaken adoptions. And based on this, we will formulate some recommendations about the most promising ones, and we'll bring them up for discussion to different standardization bodies. The results of this report and these activities will be made available as a report at the end of the project in December 2020.
Okay, to 2022, I guess.
22, yeah.
No worries. Okay, so that's very soon actually, but when you speak of interoperability standards, what is it exactly? How can we imagine an interoperability standard?
Yeah, okay, so interoperability in general makes sure that we can connect to further existing, in this case, data sharing platforms. And you can imagine interoperability in general that it's like the standardized rail network that we are having here in Europe for the most part, and which allows trains to cross from one country to another, usually without any problems. And here in this context of data sharing, we make sure that we are using up-to-date solutions in trusts or solutions that are already standards, like, for example, the IDS connector, which is a national standard in Germany already. And also we keep up with technologies considered within the Gaia X project, which is currently a European project that builds the so-called European cloud in order to ensure interoperability in this case.
Okay, that's actually very interesting to hear. And thank you a lot for those explanations, Natalia. We are almost at the end of today's podcast. Are there any final remarks you would like to share with our listeners in the framework of this talk?
Sure, to all listeners here. So I would really like to thank you for your interest in the project and in general the topic of data sharing and data markets, because I can only encourage you to keep updated on these things. What personally excites me about this project of data, or the topic of data markets and also data spaces as a basis for data markets, is that we are here currently shaping something completely new, but it's highly demanded by industry and also by individuals. And in this project, we have the possibility to implement data sovereignty technologies. What makes us keeping control over our own and personal data. And that makes this project as part of a bigger puzzle so interesting for me.
Thank you very much. It's definitely a privilege to be involved in such future shaping processes. I totally agree. And with that amazing remark, we are at the end of today's podcast. I want to thank you, Natalia, for the insights into your work at IDSA, as well as in the context of trust. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I also want to thank our listeners for their interest in our project and the specific progresses we make. Make also sure to follow us on our website as well as on social media. You can find the links in the video's description. So make sure to keep up with Europe's innovations.